we're here. Hi, well, this is the official welcome to the series, to the summit, the Women in Caribbean Aquaculture Leadership Summit. If you were here a few minutes earlier, what you saw on the screen was a little video of what are the activities that the Caribbean Aquaculture Education and Innovation Hubs um, does in the region. So I'll just start with a big welcome for you guys to thank you for being here, to thank you for supporting this summit and supporting the work of the Caribbean Aquaculture Innovation Hub. So we'll just start introducing ourselves. Um, We have Julian Russo, who's the organizer, the mastermind behind all this, an active member of the community. Julie Ann Russo is the CEO and founder of this Caribbean Aquaculture Education and Innovation Hub, and she'll tell you a bit more about what this is and what their work is about. And myself, Mariana, I work for Hatch Blue, and I manage the Women in Ocean Food Innovation Studio in Latin America, and I'll also tell you a bit more about that in a minute. So,
Go ahead.
oops, go ahead, Julie.
So this has been a process in the works. We actually started out as a networking society, Caribbean Aquaculture Network, where I wanted to be able to connect farmers because I believe within the island and throughout the islands, farmers, scientists, government are not very well connected with aquaculture. Also, aquaculture is not something that is well understood in our society. We don't have any aquaculture education classes throughout even within our tertiary. So if you want to go ahead and do a higher degree, you have to go overseas. And so this is a huge gap that needs to be filled within our Caribbean region. And so through the networking, we discovered that there are a lot of women like me because I live in Italy. There are a lot of Caribbean women that are outside of the Caribbean that are working, doing research, doing wonderful, amazing things, but are invisible. No one really knew who we were, what we were doing. And we felt the need, especially to start giving back to our region. And it just so happens that there are more women graduating in sciences than there are men. So it's kind of interesting where we had all these women scientists, very few male scientists, but no one had really known what we were doing. So we decided, and Biomar came forward, and they have been our primary sponsor to help us put together this organization, and we became WiCA in 2023. So we decided what is our portfolio, what it is that we can give back, and what we can give back as scientists is our training, education, experiences to develop research and innovation, because only through research and innovation can we have the businesses. And this is why I have loved working with Mariana, because Mariana has been helping women who are doing businesses. And as she started to look through the Caribbean, the amount of businesses, women businesses, aqua businesses are very minimal. And why is that? Because we don't have the research or innovation to help the business aspect. So this is what the hub is about. We as women scientists want to be able to develop an education, bring aquaculture into STEM, into the education system, and to educate the culture as well as our leaders why this is important. So we are just not just a women's group, we are women scientists trying to develop the region in aquaculture in the blue economy.
Thanks, Julie. Do you want to touch on women in Caribbean aquaculture and the Caribbean Aquaculture Network
Right.
as well?
So this is how we started. We started in 2021 during the pandemic as a networking platform. And I met all of you through this networking platform. We are the first platform like this throughout the Caribbean. We are what we have been doing is giving free networking events, also technical and also teaching events. And we have been doing this, and we have amassed maybe 2,000 people, almost 3,000 in our entire social media. I just amassed 1,000 in our newsletter. So before in 2021, we were unknown. Now we're sort of starting to get this going together. And so as WiCA, we want to introduce more women into aquaculture science, entrepreneurship, and help to provide the training courses through the network.
Thank you. And well, I'll talk a bit about Women in Ocean Food Innovation Studio, which is the project that I work for. First, this is a business support program for female founders in aquaculture in the blue economy. And this is focused in Latin America and the Caribbean. And the purpose of this program is to develop their commercial scalability of the projects of these women, technological readiness, industry fit, and it's a mentorship-based program as well. This happens in partnership with Conservation International Ventures, but is organized by Hatch Blue. And luckily, it has been sponsored for 4 years in the region. And we have had two cohorts. Well, 2 years out of the four have already happened. So, well, every year we have had someone from the Caribbean, and that hasn't been easy because there aren't a lot of people raising their hand and applying to programs like this. So the next couple of years, I would very much would like to see someone from any Caribbean country as part of the cohort. Like that is a personal goal and a goal of the program to go throughout the region and find talent over here.
So that is our goal also, is this summit came about to understand why is it that our women in aquaculture are invisible. We are struggling to find visibility throughout the region, to have our leaders and the NGOs that are working in aquaculture to take us seriously, if you want. And so this leadership summit came about to understand, is it our fault that we're not speaking up, or not being present, or not being visible enough? How can we become more visible? Because the more that you show up, the more you show up as scientists, the more there's a better understanding with the powers that be that, provide the funding that we do need to get more research, more education, and in order to do this, to get more businesses. So this leadership summit aims to provide visibility to women aquaculture scientists and entrepreneurs, to amplify their voices, to figure out how we can break barriers and create the pathways into leadership for women.
Yes, and I'm also very excited that we're going to touch on some of these topics during today's sessions. Um, so just to invite you to be part of this series of the summit, we'll have a very rich agenda for the following days, more than a week. So this summit goes from March 10th to March 21st, and we'll have sessions on everything that will help us in our leadership journey. We'll have smart AI tools this today at 1 p.m. We'll have something that I think is very important, Dr. Olivia Afuso session, like bravery at work. Sometimes we might feel scared of doing something or taking a leadership position or another challenge in our careers, but we're gonna do it anyway, and we know can do it. So I'm not gonna talk about specifically these sessions. You can check out the agenda at the website you registered at, but it's a very complete agenda that will provide different tools in very different other areas more than in the aquaculture professional arena, but as to develop our leaderships as persons as well. So, Julie, could you confirm that Patricia is here?
Okay, 1 second, Mariano. I'll be right with you.
Thank you. And then when that happens, I'll be very happy to introduce our special guest today, which is a prominent person from the Caribbean, but also the world. And so I'm not going to start before I know she's here. But no, we're very honored that Patricia R. Francis is coming to be with us today. In the meantime, I think I can show again
Yes,
the video
I'm just
that
having
some
a
of
little
you,
problem with the link, so I'm going to send it to her and we'll be right there.
that's great. Uh, if you were here earlier, you would see that we played a little video of what happens on the ground in the Caribbean countries that Julie um, expands her operations to as the Caribbean Aquaculture Innovation Hub. So I'm just gonna play the video. It's just 1 minute, but it's always nice to see the faces of the people that take part in these types of initiatives. So I'll just play it, and this is a little time for us to wait for Patricia to start the session. Let's go.
So Mariano, we can continue. I'm gonna just give a quick few words before we begin, and you can introduce Pat.
Please do.
So good morning, everyone. It is an honor to welcome you all to the Women in Caribbean Aquaculture Summit. Today, we come together as scientists, entrepreneurs, leaders, and visionaries, all united by our commitment to advance aquaculture in the Caribbean and beyond. As women, we know that the path to leadership in science and industry is not always easy. But we also know that the strength of a community lies in its ability to uplift and support one another. That is why this summit is more than just a gathering. It is a space where we connect, share knowledge, and build a future where women are at the forefront of a sustainable aquaculture. I encourage each of you to engage fully, ask questions, share your experiences, and build meaningful connections. Together, we are not just participants in this industry, we are trailblazers, creating a future where women's leadership in aquaculture is not the exception, but the norm. Thank you for being here, for your dedication, and for believing in the power of this community. Let's make today a turning point for women in Caribbean aquaculture. Welcome to the summit.
Thank you, Julie, and it's an honor to introduce our guest and main honorary guest speaker today, Patricia R. Francis. Patricia is a global leader in trade, development, and investment, having headed private sector, government, and international organizations to engage in formal sectors, women, small and medium enterprises, and international trades. Currently, she serves as director of White Shield, a global advisory firm providing policy innovation to support governments, international organizations, and corporations to positively transform lives. She also serves as the chair of the government of Jamaica's Trade Facilitation Task Force and holds directorships on the boards of Jamaica Producers Group, Portland JSX, and several family-owned companies. Additionally, she is the director of the Alligator Head Foundation and the Rosetown Foundation for the Built Environment. Patricia's background includes serving as special advisor to the executive director of UN Women from 2018 to 2020 and heading the UN Secretary General High-Level Panel on Women's Economic Empowerment in 2016. She was the Assistant Secretary General and Executive Director of the International Trade Center from 2006 to 2013 and President of Jamaica Promotion Corporation from 1995 to 2006. Patricia holds a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Miami with a major in biology and a minor in chemistry. And she's also the board member of numerous educational institutions, including the IESE Business School and Sciences. So without further ado, it's an honor to welcome Patricia. Welcome. Patricia, you're muted.
Thank you very much. And first of all, apologies because of the time zones. I am working in a different time zone. And when I checked your time zone thing, it said 10 o'clock. So I was on another meeting. So I do apologize. This is really not a leadership kind of thing to arrive late to a leadership meeting. So grand apologies there.
No need. We understood completely because all of us had different clocks on to make sure we're in all different kinds of time zones. So it's totally understandable.
Great. So how would you like us to start?
Well, oh, sorry. So first, we'd like to start telling the audience why this conversation of women in aquaculture, of women in leadership, why does this matter from your perspective?
Right. Thank you very much. And again, this is I think an important topic for us because we in the Caribbean, like many other places, are facing challenges with respect to climate change. Just headlines in our newspaper yesterday was about how our very important Blue Mountain coffee is being impacted by the extraordinary heat that we are experiencing here in our country. And so the impact of climate change on our weather patterns and on our oceans has been tremendous. And so we worry about food security in the future. And we see aquaculture as being very, very important in that regard. And like everything else, the importance of leadership pathways for women in agriculture is critical and important. We have some historical information about the leadership of women in the past, and we certainly want to make sure that those who have invested in higher education levels really and truly that they are experiencing the kind of leadership that they ought to and getting the kinds of rewards that they should. So I think, this morning I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the data. And if you don't mind, I could just, begin talking about the state of women actually in our economy. Would you like me to go forward that way?
Yes, please, Patricia. Thank you.
Good. So where I would start is looking at women overall. and their own contribution to the global economy. Despite the fact that we do not have equal participation, we're already contributing $7.6 trillion to the global economy. And what from everything that I've read and that has been reiterated during the International Women's Days celebrations right across the world, this number of 134 years before we get gender parity keeps coming up. And this just seems to be extraordinary. So, but when you actually look at the numbers, you come back down to saying, okay, access to finance, only 3% goes to women-owned enterprises. If you look at venture capital funding, if you look at the STEM education, including aquaculture, it's still male.
Oh, we lost Patricia. Hi, Patricia. We lost you for a second and you're muted again.
Here, I am back.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So access to finance, very important. Women seem to have less access to finance than most others. And if we look at the actual performance of women in the Caribbean, let's take it down to the Caribbean. We see that in higher education, women outperform men. And as far as our tertiary graduates are concerned, in many of the faculties, women who are graduating have, 80% of the graduates are women. But how does this translate actually into capital? And in the Caribbean itself, only 5% of capital formation is from women. So there's a huge disparity between the education and what we see as far as impact and women in the economy. So there's a huge gap there and lots of work to be done. Now, we know that 50% of the workforce in the seafood and aquaculture industries are women. That's what happens globally, but they're concentrated in the lower paid and the lower status roles. So this whole leadership gap is really important because we haven't seen that education dividend. And we need to understand why this is happening and how are we going to do things differently. So then, if I look then at what are some of the things that are holding us back, what are the policy issues that governments could actually have and policy that private sector could initiate in order to actually change this paradigm? And I've been working with a group who have been looking at access to finance for women-owned enterprises. And we've been going through the various financial institutions in the Caribbean. And the majority of the answers that we get when we speak to people who are in charge is, why do I need to have something special for women? Why is it that I need to differentiate for women? But when you look at the profile of women, because of this fact that women only
Did we lose her again?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
This happens on live TV sometimes,
I know. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, she'll come back. So everybody, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or any comments. As you hear Pat speak, hopefully we'll get her back. But if you have any suggestions or ideas about visibility, let us know. Again, it's a conversation, so we are trying to begin that conversation.
Yes. And she is here. Hi, Patricia again.
I'm sorry, I don't know what's happening with the internet, but on my side, the internet seems fine. I'm really sorry about this. So we're talking about access to finance and the fact that it's not an equal thing, that in fact women actually have less access to finance than men do, because of the fact that there's this asymmetry where women have less assets and therefore less collateral to be able to support a request from banks for financing. So this is very important to understand. So we do need to structure the financial packages for women in a way which is slightly different to men. And one of our big financial institutions, Scotiabank, in fact, has had a program specially designed for women. A number of others, like a couple of other institutions across the Caribbean, have been looking at how do we structure financing strictly for women. And this is, I think, really one of the critical things that need to be worked on to ensure that we can design packages which allow women to actually have access to finance. So then, looking at the women who are already engaged, how can we empower them? How can we look at the fishers and farmers and make sure that we are helping them to move from where they are to where they need to be? And what kind of policies can we see and put in place to have that happening? And what kinds of, how do we help people to look at access to grants, microfinance, investment partnerships, and government support? How do we make all of those things happen? And I think that when we look at the kind of mentorship that is needed to have, where we have women who are actually reaching out to others and helping them to make that leap and to understand how to navigate the financial sector, I think this is really critical and important if we are to see progress moving forward. So I think the other thing is that our women need the kind of confidence that is necessary to move up in leadership. So, I want to tell a little story about my own experience, where I started in this whole aquaculture business. It was actually in fisheries, and my husband at the time was involved in the fishing industry, and my family is still involved in the fishing industry. But in those days, our boats used to come in, and I would sit on the boat while the fish and the products were being offloaded. And the people who I was facing were market women. And they were, they didn't trust me. They didn't know, what is this brown lady doing sitting on a boat that's dispensing fish, because it didn't seem to be something which they were accustomed to. And initially they in fact, I've never been cursed like that in my life, because their thing was that if they make a lot of noise, they could actually steal some of the fish and create a commotion. And that was the way that they behaved. But they didn't know that they couldn't budge me. And so we became absolute friends with all of these market women. And I got to know them personally. I got to know their children, what they were doing with their families. I worked with these women to make sure that their children had access to the kind of education which they needed. I helped them to make sure that they actually, because these women had cash, they had money, but they weren't doing the right things for their own children. And so we set up classes for after school classes for the kids, where they actually learned how to use computers. They did their homework, that kind of thing. It was really, really important to make sure that we were helping these women not only with their own resources, but with their family coming up. So I think, that's a huge thing, that we spend time to help people move from one part, from where they are to where they need to be, to make steps in their careers. And this whole business of gender bias, this is something which I have faced in my own career. Absolutely, when I was in Geneva, it's a male-dominated area. Most of the ambassadors were male, and we had a group of female ambassadors who came together to create what we call the Lipstick Club. And in that Lipstick Club, we would work together to look at issues that were important. But for me, as the leader of my organization, I needed to get to the men that were also dominating most of the committees, making the big decisions. And I was approached by one of the male ambassadors to become the co-chair of a whiskey club. And luckily, my father had taught me how to drink whiskey. So we had this whiskey club at which we would meet once a month, and we would have a topic. And those topics were, something that was happening in the WTO. And we would bring the people who were on the committees, and we would discuss it informally there. I would even talk about my own organization and what it needed to move it forward. And through that whiskey club and through the Lipstick Club, I was able to have access to the decision makers inside of the global community that make up the WTO. And so we have to find, in wherever we are, what are the access points? How do we get to the access points? How do we join forces with others in order to be able to get to where we want to go? But in all of that, in every leadership position that I ever had, I've always been looking at how can I help to accelerate the careers of women. And it's not always easy because of the family commitments that women have. And I have always noticed that sometimes when I've offered leadership roles to various women, we have seen that their own family commitments make them unable to take on more responsibilities. And I can say that in my own life, because of my family structure, I was able to take on more leadership roles because my family stepped in to help with my kids when I was not able to do that. And my husband also did that. So that whole structure of how we make linkages with others in order to make sure that we can take on these various roles, this is something which is important. And I have to say also that I didn't expand my leadership role until my kids were at a certain stage where I felt comfortable that if I moved to Geneva, they were in a position to carry on their own lives without the kind of supervision which I would normally have given them. So yes, we make changes all through our lives depending on our situation. Now, the other thing that I think is important for women who have the ability to be advocates on behalf of others is that they have a responsibility to do that. And we will never have changes in our industries unless there is a voice. The woman's voice is at the table. So joining industry organizations is critical, whether it is a Fishers Association, whether it's an industry like in Jamaica, we have the Jamaica Manufacturers and Exporters Association, or the private sector organization of Jamaica. These are important platforms where we need to be engaged. Excuse me. So the other thing is, how do we talk to young women and encourage them that these are the kinds of careers that they ought to be looking at and where there are real opportunities. Sometimes I speak at my old high school and I go in and I talk with the girls who are in 5th and 6th forms. And this is, I guess, grades 11 and 12. And when you talk to them, they usually have a standard set of things that they're thinking about. Doctor, lawyer, accountant, actuary. They have a very narrow view of where opportunities are. But in talking to them, where you talk about, what are the potential? Look at the challenges that the world has today. Look at the environmental issues that we're facing, and are you going to be part of that solution? Are you going to be go into a career that can actually help solve some of the problems that we're facing today? And I think that our oceans and the challenge that we face in our oceans today is something which is, it's going to take all of us to be part of the solution to dealing with the challenges of our oceans. So I think that this is really, really important. And when we think about it, empowering women in aquaculture therefore requires investment in policy, finance, mentorship, determination, stick-to-itiveness, if there's such a word, and visibility. You have to be able to have your voice heard. So, of course, I spoke earlier when I was being introduced, we talked about Alligator Head Foundation. And part of why I'm part of the Alligator Head Foundation, whose mandate it is to have thriving communities and thriving oceans, is that, of course, not only is my family involved in the seafood industry, but we're also maritime people. And what's happening in the world, how we can have sustainability in both our land-based activities and our ocean-based activities is very important. And so the blue economy, how we are looking at that is going to be very important going forward. So I think, when I think about the state of our corals in the Caribbean, our reefs, the need for mangrove restoration, nature-based solutions in order to come up with solutions, we need women in this part of the looking at this kind of thing. And so this is, when we think about this, if we don't look and get engaged in these kinds of activities today, we are really down the road in terms of climate change, and we can see the impact, we can see the erosion that's taking place in our coastal areas. So there's so many new and interesting jobs in this area that it's important for us to think about this going forward. And when we think about this, what are we talking about? Because we also need to be able to harness technology. We need the kind of data analytics that is convincing and which is actually allowing us to make the right kinds of decisions. We have AI today, which can help us also, but modern farming techniques would take into consideration climate change and climate change adapted farming techniques. Very important so that we don't have the kind of runoff from our land-based activities into the oceans, polluting our oceans as well. It's very important to document our findings. And part of what I have been advocating at Alligator Head is that we actually publish our findings. We ourselves understand the challenges that we're facing in our sanctuary that we are working in. But there are so many other people across the world who are facing the same issues. So we're working towards changing that at Alligator Head to be able to share our experiences with others, and to look at the trends that are taking place and to be able to produce the right kind of analytical information that is very good for management of the resources going forward. So I think the role of women in protecting our marine ecosystem is really important, and we need to be building successful businesses around that, because when we create a sanctuary, we actually cut off the fishermen from being able to fish in those areas. And we have to find alternative livelihoods for these people. They're making the ultimate sacrifice. And so I think aquaculture is one of the methods that we can use to find alternative livelihoods, whether it is vertical fish farming, whether it is some other kind of mariculture activity. This is really important for us to be able to find alternatives. So I think, when we look at a couple of the people who are doing things, the International Blue Economy Coalition, they have launched a program to support women in marine industries. You have my old organization, the International Trade Center, which has created a thing called She Traders, which connects women to other women right across the world in new markets. And when we also look, there is a very successful women-led fishers cooperative in Latin America, which has increased community resilience. So I think then if we look back at that, other industries have implemented solutions to finding new ways and innovations to keep their own entities going, their own industries going. So I think it's time that in the Caribbean, aquaculture actually takes its place. And we can't really sit on our laurels when we have solutions to many of the problems which our people are facing. So in closing, I'd like to say, I see our Caribbean women in aquaculture as being powerful change makers. But we must be intentional about breaking barriers. They're not going to break by themselves. We need to commit to supporting other women through mentorship, through visibility, through advocacy. And I think that, when we think about if we rise by lifting others, then let's ensure that women in aquaculture don't just participate, but lead. So with that, I'd like to stop, and maybe we could take some questions.
Yes, thank you, Patricia. Let's start a discussion. I'll start with some questions that we've prepared for Patricia, but please, you in the audience, go ahead and write down your questions, and then I'll read it, and I'll read it after. So, Patricia, I'd like to start with the women's economic empowerment topic. And I know you've led the UN Secretary General's high-level panel on this particular subject. So I'd like to start with it might seem basic, but I call it a fundamental question. From a global perspective, why is women's economic empowerment so important?
I think the first thing that we need to know is that women reinvest 90% of their income in their families and communities. So it drives social change, and it also is a way of breaking the cycle of poverty. What we also see is that we've read McKinsey and others have produced documents which show that companies with diverse leadership perform better financially. And of course, if we want to see equality, it's about economic growth and innovation. It's really important to be able to have everyone have access in equal amounts. And right now, this is not the case. And, this 134 years or 35 years that you read about, where it will take us to, gender-based equality to actually take place. This is something which is just not acceptable. And as a woman who has been able to to do whatever she wanted to do, and go out there and try and make a difference. I think it's a right. It's actually a human right. So this is important.
Thank you. And now getting a bit more specific to the region, what key strategies do you believe are essential for moving the needle to women in terms of women economic empowerment, particularly in the Caribbean? What are those key strategies that you think should be implemented?
Well, the work that we're doing now on speaking to the financial institutions to educate them on how to provide finance to women-owned enterprises. This is a huge barrier. And we have to break that norm that we currently have. So there has to be policy reform at the private sector level, because while government itself is producing laws which say women can, well, this is my first experience trying to get a loan. When I first went to a bank to get a loan, I was told that my husband had to give me permission to get a loan. And so that's one of the loans that one of the laws that I advocated for change, and that change actually has taken place in Jamaica. I think right across the Caribbean, women do actually have the ability to get loans without having to get permission from their husbands. So the whole policy framework around which both government and private sector are understanding how they can play a role is really important. That's very, very important. Women themselves who are successful or who are in a place to be able to help others. You don't have to be the top, you don't have to be the CEO to be a mentor. You can be in middle management, you can even be somewhere near the bottom, and you can help others to move up the chain. And that's going to be really important. Mentorship and sponsorship, very, very important, that we need to see that kind of leadership. And then, showcasing female role models. That's a traditional thing. We see on television, we see on, media, so many men being showcased. What about our women? We need to be able to showcase our role models, and to let our young women understand where the opportunities are.
Thank you, Patricia. And I'm seeing that the clock is running this morning really quickly. So let's move to a different topic now. What you just mentioned happens in a very different sphere than we as individuals operate, as scientists, entrepreneurs. But let's provide some actionable pointers for the audience. Specifically in the Caribbean, how can women can benefit from international opportunities, specifically in trade?
Well, I think I pointed to a couple of those before. Excuse me. If we look at e-commerce, I think that this is the future. That if we want, in the Caribbean, we have very, very small markets. And if we are small companies, then e-commerce is actually an avenue that we can use to be able to get to wider markets. So having a website, having a presence on social media, and using social media as a means of presenting what product it is that you have to sell, or what service it is that you have to sell. I think these are very important. The skills of using social media now to be able to present yourself, and websites, very, very important. And I think that there are Caribbean Export and a number of other entities that exist, can help you in developing those skill sets. And I know that they're always putting on training programs. Regional trade networks, Caribbean Export, something that I think that you need to be engaged with. Caribbean Women for International Trade, and now you have Caribbean women in aquaculture. I think these are entities that you really should get engaged in. And of course, in terms of your own skills and technology to stay competitive, you've got to keep on top of it. And, you know, my kids push me because they're always changing the way that they communicate, and I have to keep changing and understanding how to use technology also. So this is something that's very, very important, that we communicate differently and we communicate to the world.
Thank you, Patricia. I think we have a question from the audience, and this is from Marilyn Teofil. She says, concerning finance, do you think women have to use alternative solutions? If yes, can you give us an example, please?
Well, I think that we have always, you know, if we don't have access to the normal banking, we do have families, we do have friends, and in the old days, in the old days, this was the way that that people progressed. This is what they did. They went to their families and friends and raised money. And today we have structures, proper structures, financial structures that allow for that kind of thing, where, you know, you don't have to do it informally anymore. We can actually, through the kind of companies that we operate, we can offer shares to those who provide financing for us. There are also cooperatives that are active and which provide support. So it's not simply the international financial institutions or private equity or commercial banks, but I think that we can look at a number of other institutions that are there to help really small entities. But I think, you know, the family thing is also important, that we think about that.
Thanks, Patricia. Julie, you have your hand raised over here, and you're muted.
Yes, there's a question from Stephanie. How can we collaborate and promote women in aquaculture, help them to gain better market access, especially when ASC, Stephanie, you might need to tell us what that is. Certifications are very costly, and in developing countries, top-down regulations are not effective, and we need the seafood consumer market to drive more sustainable innovation in aquaculture and help identify women in this field to help them gain equal pay and investment opportunities.
Well, I'm actually chairperson of what they call the Trade Facilitation Task Force in Jamaica here. And one of my challenges is to make access to a number of these certification bodies, and also make it simpler to have the kind of certification which is necessary for international markets. And that currently, you know, we have too many entities that are duplicating efforts. And so my job is to try and help to simplify the government side of things. Currently on our border, we have over 20 agencies that are operating on our border, that you touch points depending on what product you're selling. And that is a hindrance in itself. In the first world, you only have 2. We have 20. So you can just imagine the level of bureaucracy for a very small entity to try and find their way around that. So part of what we're doing is to help to simplify that process. But also, we have an organization here which is helping to ensure that the bodies that are doing the certification are actually certified globally, so that they're not just certified for Caribbean wide, but they're certified globally, so that the certification which you get in your country now will be equal to the certification that is necessary to enter most international markets, mainly the US and European Union. And that's important because if not, then you have to go through so many other layers of processes if external governments don't accept the certification which your own government bodies provide. So, this is not an easy thing, and this is probably one of the major challenges. If you're in the seafood business, you need to make sure that you have access to the kind of certification which gives you market access. And so very important that we work with governments to make this easier and easier. But it's also a question of your own way of working, to make sure that you are establishing the practices in your entity which allow for traceability, so that when you go to be certified, that it's clear that you have been following the international processes. And this is important. Recently, my sons were involved with the government and a number of other entities in getting MSC certification for our conch industry. The conch industry has never had MSC certification anywhere in the world. So this was the first in the world that this has taken place. And this was 2 years of slogging, going through all the processes to make sure that companies were following the kinds of things that they needed to do, and that governments were providing the kind of management which was necessary for this global certification to take place. I hope that helps. It's tough. There's no easy way, unfortunately, when we're talking about feeding people and providing food. We have to follow those global standards.
Thank you, Patricia. Yes, it is tough, but it's also very exciting to hear when we as the people, as humanity, unlock a new species as a certified species. I mean, it was tough, but it was certainly worth it. Okay, so time, as I said, is a speedy guide this morning. So Patricia, we are deeply grateful for your presence and the wealth of the experience that you have shared with us today. So thank you so much for your time and for being such a powerful voice in the conversation in the industry and for the region. Thank you so much. And if we had a sound, this would be when people would clap, but this is a Zoom
Well, we can
meeting,
clap
so
anyway.
yes, we can clap anyway. I don't think if your microphones are muted, but anyway, feel that from me and from the audience for sure. So we have to wrap up this session. Thank you so much, and I'll just present some final remarks and just a little um
Well, I'd like to
sure.
thank our sponsors for sure.
Yep.
I can tell you getting sponsorship was very difficult. It has always been difficult for scientists, and that's one of the reasons why we want to have these discussions, because we feel like as scientists we're kind of left off of the conversation. So BioMar has always been with us. We can't thank them enough. And Digital Grace and Hazel from Number 9 have jumped right in. Mariana, I can't thank you enough for jumping in and helping us to get this together. And our other sponsors that came in at the last minute, Moss Solutions from St. Lucia Seaweed Farmer, and the World Aquaculture Society, the Latin American Caribbean chapter, and Aquasafra and Nexus Distribution. So we thank you all for helping to make this possible.
Yes, and oh,
thank
go
you
ahead,
very
Patricia.
much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and really wishing this organization great success because we need you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
Patricia.
much.
So thank you, everyone. I'm just putting here the next. I don't see if you can see my screen, right?
Yes, go
Yes.
ahead.
Yes, you can see the whole sessions that are gonna be happening throughout this summit. Take a screenshot and you'll find us this in the website as well. So thank you. Thank you very much for being here. This was a great way to start our week, to start the summit. So it's all thank you and smiles from this side.
And see you
Thank you
this
so much.
afternoon. If you're coming, come and check us out and see you for the rest of the week. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Pat. We really appreciate you.